Picture a small glass cup, barely 6 inches high, resting in the controlled silence of a British museum display. Under the museum lights, its surface guards a secret that 21st century science still struggles to explain. It depicts the violent death of an ancient Thracian king, tangled forever in carved green vines. But the true miracle is not the carving or the myth frozen into the glass. The miracle happens the moment light passes through the vessel. In reflected daylight, the cup is a milky, jade-like green, cool and opaque as swamp water. Place a lamp behind it, however, and the entire object ignites into a translucent, glowing ruby red. Your eyes do not deceive you. The cup itself transforms, shattering every expectation of ancient technology. This is the Lycurgus Cup, the only complete Roman object of its kind ever found. Its discovery was not the end of a puzzle, but the beginning of a 2,000-year silence. To understand the depth of that silence, we must travel back to the late Roman Empire around the 4th century AD. The Roman world was a landscape of marble, iron, and fragile imperial power. Glassmakers were highly skilled, but their science was a craft of fire, breath, and intuitively mixed minerals. They could produce vivid colors by adding impurities to molten silica. Copper could summon a blue sky, manganese could wash the glass in deep purple, and iron could blush into amber. None of these traditional methods, however, could produce a glass that actively shifts color with the light. For that, you need to manipulate materials at a scale far smaller than a single grain of sand. You need to enter the ghostly realm of nanotechnology. When scientists finally trained powerful electron microscopes on a tiny shard of the Lycurgus Cup, the truth left them breathless. The glass matrix is impregnated with minuscule particles of gold and silver, ground down to the size of a virus. These precious metal flecks, about 70 nanometers wide, are suspended in the glass in an extraordinarily precise ratio. It is a colloidal alloy so finely crafted that it interacts with the light waves directly. Electrons on the surface of the nanoparticles vibrate in resonant harmony with certain colors of the light spectrum. This effect, called surface plasmon resonance, absorbs some wavelengths and scatters others, gifting the cup its otherworldly color shift. To give you context, modern physicists only formally described this principle in the 20th century. We learned to create similar dichroic effects for advanced optical sensors and space-age materials. Yet here it was, a chalice forged in antiquity, using a quantum-level effect long before we even knew quantum mechanics existed. No Roman recipe, scroll, or workshop manual has ever been found that details this process. The secret doesn't appear in Pliny the Elder's encyclopedias of natural wonders. The silence grows deeper when you realize this was not a one-off accidental contamination of the glass batch. The nanoparticle concentration is too consistent, too perfect, to be random chance. Someone had to know how to seed the glass with these invisible metals, controlling a level of chemistry thought impossible for their era. This is where rational archaeology steps into a dense, cold fog, and the labyrinth of theories begins. The most pragmatic theory suggests a lonely, forgotten alchemist, a nameless genius working in absolute secrecy. Perhaps he was staining glass with gold chloride, unknowingly echoing the later experiments of 17th century alchemists like Johann Kunkel. His exact technique, a single irreproducible accident of furnace temperature and contaminated minerals, died with him in some forgotten workshop fire. Another hypothesis looks eastward into the echoing courts of the Sasanian Empire. Persian glassmakers were masters of luxury, and perhaps the raw, gold-infused glass ingots traveled the Silk Road into Roman hands. The Roman craftsman might have carved a material whose true creation he did not fully understand. A darker, more haunting theory proposes that the Romans had indeed stumbled upon a systematic form of nano-alchemy. Perhaps they soaked porous glass into a solution of gold dissolved in aqua regia, allowing the metal to creep into the silica skeleton before an intense heat cycle fixed it in place. Wherever the truth lies, the physical object still bears the scars of an older, violent tradition. The cup is a cage cup, or diatritum, a masterwork of undercut carving where a delicate outer mesh of vines is painstakingly freed from the solid glass body. It is the carved legend of Lycurgus, a Thracian king who sought to destroy the wine god Dionysus. In the frozen drama, the king is entangled by Ambrosia, a nymph transformed into a vine, binding him forever in poisoned branches. The mythological scene is a dark mirror of the vessel itself, a man trapped inside a technology he fought to control. To the Romans, myth and matter often collapsed into a single, meaningful artifact. A drinking vessel that changed from the green of living sap to the red of blood likely served as a deliberate theatrical prop. Imagine a Roman feast at twilight. The cup sits filled with wine, dark and dormant, in the flickering olive oil lamplight. Then a servant lights a torch behind it, and the wine vessel suddenly glows like a fresh wound, revealing the god's wrath to the startled guests. The psychological impact must have been staggering. A miracle of statecraft held in the palm of the emperor's hand. Standing before the display today, the human toll of this mystery becomes palpable. Think of the countless glassblowers whose lungs were ruined by furnace heat, their secrets swallowed by the grave. Think of the archaeologists who excavated the cup from its sarcophagus burial, touching a surface that defied their textbooks. Modern researchers have worn down laboratories trying to replicate the exact internal structure of this single artifact. We can make dichroic glass, but we cannot precisely replicate the craft conditions, the impurity profile, or the ancient cooling rhythms of a 4th century Roman kiln. The cup holds onto its process with the silent stubbornness of a sealed tomb. There is a profound restlessness in possessing an object we can physically measure but cannot historically explain. Science can map the electron valence, date the wood impressions, and map the gold lattice, but it cannot summon the voice of the last man who knew the secret. The Lycurgus Cup forces us to acknowledge that history is not a staircase leading neatly upward to modernity. It is a landscape of isolated peaks that suddenly rise into the fog, only to be erased completely. The dark vines carved around the glass are more than decoration. They are a metaphor for the labyrinth of time itself. Each twisted tendril wraps around a piece of lost knowledge, a vanished language, a forgotten empire. The human obsession with this cup is not just about nanoparticles. It is about the unbearable fragility of memory. We tell ourselves that time reveals all things, but as you look upon this blood-red glow, that promise feels hollow. Civilizations collapse, libraries turn to ash, and a piece of technology 2 millennia ahead of its time can be sold as a schinsel curiosity in a marketplace. The chimerical nature of the glass, green like the forest and red like a dying star, speaks to the duality of human genius. We are capable of discovering fire and controlled nuclear fission, yet equally capable of losing that fire in the space of a single generation. The Lycurgus Cup is a message in a bottle from a drowning age, but the ink has vanished, leaving only the bottle's impossible beauty behind. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle until you stand at the edge of this silence. The abyss of the past doesn't scream. It simply glows a quiet, seductive red. What other technologies were lost to the bonfires of religious purges, the sack of cities, or the slow decay of oral tradition? Were there engines of war that dissolved into rust before Archimedes' final fatal equation was cut short? The cup offers no answers. It only deepens the question, much like the shifting light that passes through its skin. And yet the dust of the years settles on everything, obscuring even these profound anomalies. The relentless sand of time races through the hourglass, and with every grain, another invisible artisan is erased from human memory. This is the enduring enigma, the eternal fade that the Lycurgus Cup represents. We are left not with a solution, but with a sensation, the shiver of trespassing on the frontier of our own ignorance. The creature of the unknown doesn't dwell solely in deep oceans or distant galaxies. It rests in a glass case in London, under a controlled humidity level. The next time you see a stained glass window catching the sunset, remember the blood-red chalice of Rome. The cup still stands, worn by the years, patiently holding its shattered secret in the lattice of its own artificial shadow. It waits for a future that might finally be wise enough to understand the forgotten past it represents. If this journey into the silent chapters of history has ignited that restless curiosity within you, we invite you to remain with us. The darkness of the unknown is vast, and every artifact we unearth merely illuminates how much more there is to explore. The Lycurgus Cup is but one ghost in a museum filled with thousands, each waiting for the light to reveal their true nature. Until we meet again, keep your eyes on the shadows and wonder at the impossible relics left behind by the hands of the vanished.